Hello and welcome back to part 2 of our look at the core range of the Balvenie. We, by some wonder of science, just destroyed our review of the 14-year-old Caribbean Cask, so we're going to reshoot it. It should be fresh in our mind since we only did it 5 minutes ago, so we will hope that it doesn't repeat because we've only got a little bit of whiskey left.
As luck would have it, we didn't obliterate our entire supply, so here goes for round 2.
Yes, indeed. So,
So we have here a primarily bourbon matured whiskey, we believe, which has been finished in casks previously used for Caribbean rum, particular 3 distinct rums from the West Indies.
Yes, so sort of a subsection of the Caribbean there, I suppose. And I just recently, I was at a Balvenie, and Glenfiddich tasting, and I was able to get a few good bits of info out of the brand man they had there, and so I've got quite a good story about how they actually get these Caribbean casks, which are maybe less Caribbean than they might have you think. What they do, the casks actually start out in America at the Wild Turkey cooperage, and they come over as fresh virgin oak, probably charred, but who knows, either way, unused, and they are filled with this Caribbean rum, which is tankered straight over from the Caribbean to the Balvenie. And they're filled up with this rum, where they will sit there and age, or really only season, you'd call it, for 8 or 9 months. That rum is then drained from those casks, promptly sent back to the Caribbean for apparently more than it was purchased. So it's a bit of a Scottish fairy tale, really. They get seasoned casks and they make a little bit of dosh in the process. So ingenious system, but maybe not. They're not maybe the Caribbean casks that people are thinking of. They are not casks that rum matured in. They were casks that already partially matured rum sort of went for a Scottish holiday in, which is a bit weird, but I suppose it serves their purposes, and it does give them complete control over what they're getting. You know, you wouldn't ever end up with a dodgy rum cask or one with a rat in or whatever else goes on in the less regulated, you'd have to say, Caribbean distilling environment. So I guess you could only applaud them for inventing their own system there.
Well, it means that, curiously, Balvenie get to make their own rum casks.
Yeah, I would
still
be
authentic Caribbean rum that's been in them.
If anyone knows what form this sort of Balvenie Caribbean holiday rum takes, I would be deeply, deeply fascinated to try it. I'm sure it pops up somewhere, although whether it mentions the Balvenie, and I suspect for it probably does not, I'd still be fascinated to know if that was actually available for purchase.
Rum does mature much slower in cooler climes, so...
Well, who knows? Anyway, this is the result. This is Balvenie, 14 years old in, I suspect, if not primarily then exclusively bourbon casks, and then put into these sort of seasoned casks for about 8 or 9 months. Fairly short finish there, which is probably pretty strategic because rum finishes can go out of control pretty quickly sometimes, and it really isn't just a rum finish, it's also, if you think about it, a virgin oak finish, because these were fresh casks, and after only 8 months with rum in them, they're still tantamount to fresh casks, so there'll be very, very active things going on here. So,
yeah, been a few rum finishes, not a whole lot. They kind of peaked, I guess.
There was a bit of a, I think there was kind of a fad about 5 or 6 years ago. It seemed like everybody had one, you know.
When the novel cask fad was kind of at its peak.
And now I think probably William Grant and Sons is the one to hold on to it, because of course their 21-year-old, last I checked anyway, Glenfiddich, they were still a rum cask, and this one's a rum cask. So with 2 in their core range, they're probably sort of the last scions of the rum cask, really.
First one I had was a Benriach, I think a 15-year-old for rum finish, and I really enjoyed it.
So, as for the whiskey, only 2 years older than the last one, so it'll be a little bit more mature, but not by a great deal. So we'll be looking for more differences to the character than necessarily a difference in maturity here, because 2 extra years is significant but not a huge quantity.
Nose is sweet but not overwhelmingly so. Relations of ginger, a little bit of allspice and other spicy characters.
It's very reminiscent of the 12, but the spice, I think, has really been brought up a notch, and this ginger element is new. And what both of those do is serve to dry out the nose quite a bit. It's maybe just a tiny bit smoother on the nose, maybe a hair less prickle, but there's less honey, and in its place there is more spice and more ginger, drier sort of flavours. And on the palate,
that is explosive. It's fizzy, quite warm, a lot of a spicy heat.
it's
Good lations of rumbo. It's kind of like, it's putting me in mind of those really high quality, well matured rums which have not been then topped up with extra sugar post distillation.
sadly still something of a minority, but we do seek them out when we can. This one, it is, as I was hoping, it is different in character rather than necessarily in maturity. I think it does show a little bit of extra maturity in that it doesn't have such a fiery start to the palate, so it's a bit clearer in the flavours that it displays without having to sort of slog through that. Somewhat paradoxically, though it has a little bit more mature in its texture, it's a lot drier than the 12. This added spiciness is particularly that ginger, and particularly that sort of extra clove, and there's some pepper in there as well. Generally spicy flavours, it is drying the whiskey out, so it's a much less of a sort of rich honeyed flavour than that first one.
It's sweet, but not in the kind of mass-produced commercial rum kind of sweetness. More of a sweetness of, say, a rum-soaked sultano. A bit fruity, a bit chewy, some sugars there, but with a good sort of dry, spicy backbone too.
If you imagine a less of a honey sweetness and more of a brown sugar sweetness, that's sort of like a raw sugar. If you don't have brown sugar, might be a bit unique to more Britishy places like ours, but coffee crystals, raw sugar, that sort of thing. Unrefined, darker sugar that has that sort of sugarcane flavour on it.
Demerara, muscovado, that sort of a thing.
That sort of ballpark there. I'll see what it does with a wee bit of water.
Oh, that's brought out a little bit of a blossom and lime character.
Yeah, a little bit of rose petal, which I believe the previous one had just an inkling of.
And a bit of citrus.
I'm getting quite a bit of sort of menthol eucalyptus from the French oak, almost said French, fresh oak too, which again serves to dry out that whiskey. So though it's really only 2 years apart and a slightly different finish, and not even much of a hugely different finish. We're only talking about 8 or 9 months here, so a fairly light finish. It's quite a different whiskey in terms of its character. It's a more focused, it's a narrower band of flavours, but it does them, I think, a little bit more justice than the 12-year-old did.
And on the palate, that water has dulled some of the lingering sweetness and exacerbated the spices and those savoury rum characters, which are normally less present in most rums, and certainly less present in most whiskies. So it's a good kind of a woodiness there too. I attribute to the fairly young casks and possibly some of the bourbon maturation too. But no, it's impressively. I wouldn't say it's outright savoury. It's less sweet than you expect for something that's both Scotch and finished in a rum cask.
Yeah, I think this we had to draw a line under this one. It's a spicy, drier whiskey. So, scores. I had a bit of trouble scoring the last one. I had to think quite hard about it. This one is a little clearer to me, which I think speaks to the more focused flavours. And here I can get a hold of it much faster. Funnily enough, I'm going as it's gone 2 years higher. I'm going 2 points higher. I do like it a bit more than 12. I'm going with an 86 for this one. What do you think?
I'll also rate it higher than the 12-year-old Doublewood by 1 point. This one rates an 89 from me. It's got a good core of distinct flavours. It's a kind of flavour profile that will appeal well to someone who likes a moderately sweet and very spicy, quirky Scotch, or if you like a well-matured, boutique, very low sweetness kind of a rum, then this is also going to be right up your alley, and it's definitely worth it.
The scores are still going in the right direction, so that's all good things to see. So we will get straight on to the last one, the 17-year-old, and see what that's got for us. In the meantime, sit tight, we will be right back. Slanja.